Dungeons of Hinterberg is a brand new RPG game with some social sim elements to it, and this is a game that's not at all like the games I typically play, mainly because of those social sim elements. But over the past month or so, I found myself really wanting to play a game like this, a game that I feel most people would describe as cozy. But I also wanted combat because I knew for me personally that I would need that combat itch scratched if I was to properly appreciate a game like this, especially since this would be my first foray into the genre. So I did what anyone would have done in my situation, and I googled games that fit my criteria, and lo and behold, I saw that a brand new game was coming out that looked like exactly what I wanted to play, and it's Dungeons of Hinterberg. Which worked out perfectly, by the way, because if you're new to this channel, you should know that I talk about and I review brand new games on this channel all the time. It's what I do. And so that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to review the game for you. I'm going to show you some raw gameplay, but before I do that, hit that subscribe button. Like I said, I talk about and review brand new games. I do a lot of day one reviews, but I do other video game discussions as well. So hit that subscribe button if you're interested. But anyway, let's talk about Dungeons of Hinterberg. So first off, like I say in most of my day one reviews, this is a first impressions review. The game just came out this morning on the Xbox Game Pass, and I have put several hours into the game already, but I certainly have not beaten the game yet. I've yet to see everything this game has to offer. I've yet to get my hands stamped at the end of all 25 dungeons. But if you're anything like me, you want to know a game is good from the start. You want to know whether or not you'll have fun in a relatively short period of time. You're sick of hearing the constant promise that a game gets good eventually after you play it for at least a year and a half. But with that being said, depending on how this video performs, I will make a follow-up review that will be more in-depth after I put even more hours into the game. And also, all of the gameplay that you're seeing right now is from very early on. I will talk about the story, but I won't get into any super specific details about the story, so this review will be mostly spoiler-free. But anyways, what is the Dungeons of Hinterberg? It's a light RPG game with some simple yet pretty satisfying combat, puzzle solving, and a surprisingly engaging story so far. And again, a pretty big focus on social simulation as well. And I'm actually going to talk about the story first because the story beats are what set up pretty much all other aspects of this game. You play as a character named Luisa, and she's pretty burnt out and bored with her life. She's a junior lawyer, and she feels just like every day is exactly the same. There's no spontaneity. There's no surprise. There's nothing that gets her blood pumping like a coked out gorilla on a rampage, which is apparently what she wants, so she travels to the village of Hinterberg, where recently magic has appeared in the village and in its surrounding areas, along with monsters, and more importantly, dungeons. And countless tourists travel to Hinterberg to be part of this newly found magic, and to complete the dungeons. Some do it for the rush and for the thrill, others do it to elevate their social media status, and some, like Luisa, do it because their life is just boring as fuck, and they need some sense of something special. But the world in this game, Hinterberg and its surrounding areas, are just packed to the brim with charm, a cozy vibe that I just loved being in. For the most part, there's 3 different kinds of areas that you're going to be exploring in this game. The first being the village of Hinterberg itself. This is where most of the social sim elements are going to take place, where you can talk to people, form friendships, go shopping, that sort of thing, which I'll talk more about that later. Then there's the surrounding areas. These are mini open world-like areas that you can explore. They'll have some enemies, some friendly NPCs that you can talk to, some treasures that you can find, and these areas are what you're going to have to get through in order to get to the dungeons, which is the third main type of area in this game. Dungeons are pretty much what you'd expect them to be in a game like this, but that's not a bad thing. You'll enter them. There'll be different enemies you'll have to fight and conquer, a boss fight or two, and some puzzle solving. And this is what the core of the gameplay is, and I must say, that core gameplay is a lot more satisfying than I thought it would be. The game starts with your basic RPG mechanics. You have a sword, and you can lock onto enemies. There's light attacks, heavy attacks. You dodge to avoid being hit. And again, it's simple, but it's smooth as hell. But more importantly, it's just fun to do. The game feels super responsive on the Xbox Series X. There's a decent balance between pacing yourself between attacking and defending. And as the game progresses, you unlock magic spells that make the gameplay even more fun. In the first area, there's 2 core spells that you unlock. The first is a giant ball that you can drop and then detonate and it explodes. And the second is a chain that you can send flying outward, and you use it to pull things, like enemies towards you, or treasures and items that might be too high for you to reach yourself. But you get different spells in different areas, which is something I really love about this game, so it kind of guarantees that gameplay is going to constantly change up. You'll get different techniques for both combat and puzzle solving depending on the area that you're in. But yeah, you can use these spells for combat and for exploration, but they're more often used for puzzle solving, and it reminded me a lot of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. If you liked the shrines in those games, you'll definitely like some of the puzzle solving in this game. But that's not to say this game is a mimic or a clone. It doesn't really feel like they necessarily copied Nintendo's homework or anything like that. It just feels like it has a hint of it sprinkled throughout, just a dazzle of inspiration. But anyway, when you reach the end of a dungeon, you get a stamp, and it seems like your main goal in this game is to get all 25 stamps from all 25 dungeons. But of course, some dungeons get harder and harder as you progress. Enemies become a higher level and they end up dealing more damage as well. But like I said, this game is mostly an RPG, so you'll find better weapons, you get better gear, and so on and so forth. But now, let's talk about the social sim elements of this game. The part of the game that's mostly new to me, because again, I've never really played a social sim game before. But when you're between dungeons and you're not out exploring, you return to Hinterberg, and around the town are several different NPCs that you can talk to, and you can befriend them, other explorers, a photographer, trainers, etc. And when you talk to them and you spend time with them, your friendship with them levels up, and different characters give you different rewards. But you can't just go around and talk to everyone as much as you want to. You can't just reap every single upgrade they have to offer. The game is broken up into days, and you can only do so much stuff, and you can only do a certain amount of interactions before the day is over. But also within a day, you also have to fit in other stuff as well, like your shopping, buying new weapons, buying potions, and so on and so forth. And I gotta be honest with you, I really like this mechanic. It makes socializing have a purpose besides just story stuff. It's essentially how you level up, and it'll make a replay pretty interesting as well, because you'll be able to prioritize different friendships and therefore get different buffs. And I must say, this game has officially opened the door to this brand new genre for me. So recommend me some good social sim games in the comments down below, and I'll give you bonus points if those games include combat. But anyway, Dungeons of Hinterberg is not a perfect game, and I do have some critiques with it as well. The first being, and I may be in the minority here, but I'm not a big fan of the graphics. I do like the world design and the character designs, and the monster designs are really cool as well, but just the style of the graphics look really, really ugly to me. And I'm a fan of cel-shaded games, generally speaking. I do like it every now and then when a game has a stylized look to it. Even an overly stylized look can really match certain games, and I think making a game's graphics super stylized or cel-shaded can be a legit good way for a smaller developer to make a pretty looking game when they might not necessarily have the resources or the manpower to make a beautiful game or a realistic game, technically speaking. But with this game, it just looks ugly to me. It looks like an ugly, muddy world trying to be hidden by a coat of paint. But don't get me wrong, I do think the art style for the most part matches the tone and the vibe that they're going for, and my disliking of the visuals isn't strong enough to take me out of the experience or to really lessen the game at all for me. Another critique I have with the game, and again, this is probably just a personal preference thing, but I really wish there was at least some voice acting in this game, especially for the bigger plot moments, but again, I can get over that easy enough. But if you couldn't tell by now, I am really enjoying this game so far. In fact, it might be my personal biggest surprise hit of the year so far. You know how every year there's a game that wasn't really on most people's radars, but when they play it, it usually ends up being one of their favorites? That's probably gonna be this game for me by the time the year is over, but I hope it stays that way. I hope the game continues to introduce new things as it progresses. I hope it manages to avoid getting stale, because I can see that being an unfortunate reality the more that I play it. I can say though, despite how much I'm liking Dungeons of Hinterberg, I can tell this game isn't gonna be for everybody. It's definitely on the simpler side of things, especially for an RPG game. Don't expect an insane amount of depth or customization or anything like that. Don't expect the gameplay to necessarily blow you away, but for me, this is a perfect, what I like to call, in-between game. This is the kind of game that I can kind of just sit back, relax, and play in between gaming sessions of the bigger games that I'm playing. I do appreciate that this game is on the Xbox. That console needs more games for sure, but I really wish this game was on the Nintendo Switch as well, because it would also be a perfect game to just pick up and play while you're doing other stuff, like while there's like a YouTube video on in the background, or while you're waiting for the horse to bring you to the doctor's office, or whatever. And also, for the love of God, release a damn physical copy of this game. I'm a physical collector, and I believe in game preservation, and I want to be able to play this game if Godzilla ever attacks and the power grid just goes out. Digital only is just an excuse for studios to pinch pennies. Don't be a bastard. Release the game physically. But anyway, that's my quick and brief thoughts after playing Dungeons of Hinterberg for a good handful of hours now. Have you played the game yet? If you have, let me know what you're thinking about it in the comments. If you haven't played it yet, let me know. Do you plan to? Or are you going to ignore it completely? Either way, I look forward to hearing from you in the comments. And once again, consider subscribing if you haven't already. And thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.